call the November 5th DRB meeting to order. First is agenda changes. I don't know of any. All right, if all the board members can review the minutes of October 15th.
I'll make a motion to accept.
Any more discussion?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And abstain. All right, up next is Roger and Lisa Daggett, sketch plan review for a 2-lot subdivision. How you doing?
Doing very well, and you?
Good. If you can just give us a quick overview of what you want to do, and then I think what we'll do is we'll go right after the staff comments, one by one.
Perfect. Actually, as a major portion of our presentation, I used to be going one by one through the staff. Perfect.
Just state your name for the viewing audience.
Yes. My name is Ben Heath, and I'm the Vice President of Hamlin Consulting Engineers. Our office is located in Essex Junction. And I'm here this evening representing Roger and Lisa Daggett as they have submitted sketch plan application to the town of Hinesburg for a minor subdivision on the existing Dynamite Hill Road. Tonight, the goal for us is to help you folks understand where the project is located, what the meat of the project is, what the applicants are interested in doing on this property. I want to go through the history of the approvals of Dynamite Hill Road and really dive into the staff comments so that we can kind of take the staff comments and look at the previous historical information for this development so the board can see what approvals have already been made and which comments have already been dealt with previous approvals.
Okay.
So if you have questions along the way, just feel free to interrupt me and I'll just dive in here. Is everybody on the board familiar with Dynamite Hill Road and where it's located?
Yep, I am.
Okay, very good. So this is the approved plan for the 4-lot subdivision.
You want to hit the light, my bank of lights?
Oh, and I should mention too that we've provided you folks with
They'll do the trick.
we provided you guys with hard copies of all this as well. So you have two different packets there. You have some plans and then some 8.5 by 11s. Keep the plans with you because we're going to refer back to those. But then every document that I'm going to show you on the screen is also provided in the 8.5 by 11s with some highlighting and things of that nature. So you should be able to follow along using that, or you can look at the screen. So just to help everybody kind of zoom in here, this is Pond Hill Road here, located on the right-hand side of the screen, and this was the original alignment that was provided by the applicant for Dynamite Hill Road, and this is a 4-lot subdivision. Lot 1 is located down here in this quadrant, Lot 2 here, Lot 3 is here, and then Lot 4 is shown up here. This project includes subdividing Lot 4 and creating a 4-bedroom single-family home, and that is located generally in this location here. Now, a few important things to note is the configuration of the existing Dynamite Hill Road and its terminus. So you will find that generally speaking, the alignment that's shown in this plan is not exactly what was built as indicated in the staff report. However, we will help you understand why that is and why that was approved in a certain way that allowed them to move the road in order to deal with maintaining certain grades along the route here. And you'll also notice that the approved Dynamite Hill Road terminates at essentially the interface between lots 3 and lots 4, and from that point forward it's a private driveway. It's also important to note that Dynamite Hill Road is a private road, it is not a town-maintained road.
So this was a 74-acre parcel. There was a subdivision in 88 or 89. And as I read through the stuff, it was like a 2-lot subdivision. Was anything built then? And then in 2000, there was another subdivision. I'm kind of wondering where the rest of this land is.
Okay, I am very familiar with the history from the 4-lot subdivision forward. What was going on with the land prior to that, I don't have experience with. You're curious as to what has already been approved in terms of building development?
Well, going through our reports, there was an original subdivision in 88 or 89, probably before even Ted was involved in this. So we can't call on him
Probably
as...
not, but I don't remember it.
It sounds like there was a two-lot subdivision of a 74-acre parcel, and then there was 53 acres left over, and then in 2000, there's this subdivision, and I don't know how big these lots are. Are they like 10 acres? Are they all 10 acres?
The original 4 acres that, 4 lots that we had were on a 53-acre parcel.
Okay.
There's a 10-acre parcel that was separate that was built on after we built. It wasn't subdivided, it was already a subdivided parcel.
So where is that? Is that to the
That's-
south of the west, the lower
Right,
part of the screen?
west of 3 and 4.
Yeah, to the west of 3 and 4.
The west or to the
That's
east?
it.
East,
East, I'm
Yeah, I
sorry.
think
Yeah.
these,
Yeah.
Greg, I think these are the two lots that comprise the
Yeah.
rest of the original 88 subdivision.
Hmm.
And there's a house on each of them.
No, okay.
So the lands of interest for this project really relate to lots 1 through 4, as shown
Yeah.
generally in this outline here.
All right.
So this is a site plan that we've provided as part of the sketch plan application, which has an ortho photo as our base map. And you'll find that this is a relatively straightforward proposal. We have an existing approved road that terminates, Dynamite Hill Road terminates right here between the interface of Lot 3 and Lot 4. And then from that point forward, there's a driveway that leads to an existing single-family home. So this is zoomed in. This comprises all of Lot 4 shown in this configuration here. And so the goal here is for the owners of Lot 4 to subdivide this, generally speaking, this chunk of land, about 3.1 acres, and construct a single-family home. So the goal here is for there to be some type of easement. So there's an existing driveway already here, and the owners of Lot 4 would provide some kind of easement so that they could access this property. And our office has gone out and performed some due diligence in terms of data collection. We've performed some topographic survey out here, located property corners. We performed some test pit and perk test analysis, and we've confirmed that we can, this site can support a 4-bedroom single-family home. And we have building envelope and other geometry information here which meets town zoning rules. We've also gone out and located all of the drilled wells within relatively close proximity to the site and provided what the town would consider undevelopable lands as hatched in these hatches here, which are lands that are excessively steep.
So what's the point of kind of the C-shaped bigger lot? Why are you proposing to retain the area in the back?
Well, it's my understanding that this whole area out here is undevelopable. It's excessively steep back there, and one of the requirements was for there to be a 100-foot buffer essentially from this back property line, which we did provide. Why the applicants chose this exact configuration, my guess is that they have an existing UTV trail that's back here and an access trail for these lands, and they wanted to maintain this wooded area. I guess could the applicant speak more to why this configuration was desired?
Yeah, exactly what you said, maintain some of the trails. Also, we didn't want to interrupt any boundaries in the back, you know, with other property owners. So we're kind of trying to keep it a little simple as far as that goes.
And this size configuration for this lot is ample enough to support this project in terms of having enough area to have a septic system, to have a drilled well. I'll get into some minor changes that we will have to the building envelope based on staff comments, but I'll wait till we get there. But There's already a cleared piece of land in this general area here where there was this is a former site for a wind turbine. So this just seemed like an appropriate place to construct a single-family home based on the fact that there's already been a disturbance here, there's already some tree clearing that's gone on here, and it appeared to be a suitable place for a new home. So I'd like to dive into the comments from staff here, unless you guys have specific questions about the house configuration, about the septic systems, and we can get into that more, but I really want to dive into the staff comments because that'll help us kind of bring alive the history associated with Dynamite Hill Road, and we can go back to the actual site configuration if you folks want to comment more on that. I'm gonna read each comment and provide some information based on the information that we received from staff and our own digging into town records for this approval process. Staff comment number 1 is related to access for emergency vehicles. The town fire chief said that that most of the year emergency services can be provided, but during bad weather, when Dynamite Hill Road becomes icy, they cannot guarantee emergency services. Per section 5.1.11 of the HSR, does the development place an undue burden on emergency services? Section 4.4.13 for development on a private right-of-way requires evidence that the road will permit emergency vehicle access to the site at all seasons. Currently, according to the fire chief, this criteria is not being met. The applicants were required in the 2000 subdivision approval to return with a plan to address the situation by June 1st, 2001. This included plans to move the road cut to allow a flat entry onto Pond Road, or alternative improvements such as paving to improve the roadway may be proposed. Alternatives shall be proposed only after all avenues for road cut movement are pursued. The applicants must address this at the hearing. So I'd like to dive into what was approved in 2000 and wonder where this comment is coming from. So to do that, I want to go to a memo that was written to the Hinesburg Planning Commission from the Public Works Director. And this is going to be referenced in an approval that you'll see in a minute, so that's why we're showing it to you here. The applicants, when they were providing testimony and information regarding their 4-lot subdivision and the construction of the new road, they made it through, it took about a year, but they made it through the approval process, but then there were 4 conditions that the board had asked for in order before they could get final approval for the project. And so these 4 conditions are very important because most of these conditions are going to keep coming up in staff comments. So basically the town board said, look, if you meet these 4 conditions, the project is approved. And at this time, they're laid out here. There's side cuts that need to be made, a flat stopping area at the bottom of the drive to connect to Pond Road, culverts, and things of that nature. So the applicant works with the town and is able to successfully gain this subsequent letter from Rocky Martin, who was the Director of Public Works, which states, conditions 1, 3, and 4, as outlined in the previous memo I just showed you to the Hinesburg Planning Commission concerning the Daggett subdivision has been met. Condition 2 involved a flat stopping area at the bottom of the road at the intersection of Pond Road. The Hinesburg Planning Commission waived this condition. So the Planning Commission said, there's 4 conditions to get approval. This is all you have left to do. Once you meet those 4 conditions, your project is approved. And the Public Works Director here very clearly states that all 4 of those conditions had been met.
Well, that's not what it says.
Yeah, I think what the staff report clarifies is that the Planning Commission in November of 2000 indicated that emergency pull-offs would be a short-term solution to the lack of a flat entry from the town road, and that by a certain date, I guess it was June 1st of 2001, a long-term solution would need to be proposed. And that's what we were trying to pull out in the staff comments, that's the part that never happened. There was never any follow-through on that.
But at the bottom of this document, it clearly states the road as installed from Pond Road is approved and accepted. So in our opinion, we had 4 conditions. Those 4
That doesn't make a requirement to come back to the planning. The Public Works Director cannot make a condition go away, and there's a condition that says by June 1, 2001. What it does is let you have access and get a CO now, But you still have to come back in by June 2001 and tell us what you're gonna do to fix the problem.
So
We were being very, if not overly, accommodating of the applicant at the time to allow them to get COs and use the road. But the condition to come back was always there and was never met.
So there was a condition which allowed them to build the road and build the properties, and so essentially the project is approved, but then there's a condition to come back to do something different?
Exactly.
I think this is gonna be a long meeting. I think maybe we ought to kind of tick off these things, because I think you're gonna have a lot of pushback from the board on a lot of these issues, but we'd like to, I for one, would like to kind of hear your quick comment on a lot of these issues, but you're not getting anywhere with me on that.
Very good. Okay, well, the way that we read the approval, I guess it's very unusual for a board to approve something with a condition to come back after the project is constructed. That's,
We had requirements on what it had to meet. We're told that it was gonna meet those, and it did not meet those. It did not meet the flat area by the road, and there's some grades that are over 15%. We were told that would never happen when the subdivision was being presented to us originally, that it could be built in accordance with the standards, and it was not built in accordance with the standards. The rest of this is our accommodating the fact that people wanted to sell lots and move into their homes.
okay.
If you want to get a sketch plan approved here, I think you're going to have to talk about what's going to happen going forward, not what may have been approved or not approved in the past. We need to see an approvable plan, and that's what we're here for.
I guess when Rocky Martin approved that, we thought he was acting on behalf of the town and his position with the town, that, yes, you've met all these four, these four conditions. And he actually came out and tested the grade and tested the width. He dug down to make sure we had fabric. I mean, he gave a lengthy test of that road.
We have subdivision and zoning regulations in effect that govern this proposal. I'd like to hear how your proposal is going to deal with those as they currently exist, not as they existed 20 years ago. So go forward on that one, please.
Anyway, to further supplement that, there's been conversation with the fire chief, and I don't know if that was through the applicant or from town staff only. Has there been conversation with the highway foreman, with Mike directly from the applicant?
Not to my knowledge.
No, those conversations with the fire chief were staff conversations, and we did check in with the highway foreman as well. He didn't submit any comments, didn't express any concerns about the road or the project, but the fire chief did, and that's why the fire chief's comments are included.
So was there, because I guess the verification of the 15% gradient, and I know that was part of the reason why the topography was selected. I guess that would be something that I would be curious to hear from Mike, to verify that indeed that gradient is being met.
We have information on that we can share tonight. The part that we're struggling with here is that we have a roadway, which is a private road, and that road has been approved by the town. We're not proposing to do anything to that road as part of this project. We are only talking about improvements to Lot 4, no improvements to the road. The road's been approved by the town.
Well, then you're going to lose my vote immediately, because you have to do something to change what exists, because it does not comply with our regulations.
Can I just,
The road's approved.
can I just ask a question?
You're asking for a subdivision.
What has changed for the past 20 years? We've been living up to.
You're asking for a subdivision, it has to conform to our current regulations. I have a question as to whether this does or does not.
Okay.
Nothing that was approved 20 years ago has any relevance to whether this particular application conforms with our current zoning and subdivision regulations.
Very good. But I definitely want to discuss that in terms of Lot 4, but again, the roadway up to Lot 4 has been approved. It's an approved road.
False in my estimation. So I'm just speaking for myself, but
If it's not an approved road, how are people able to build up there? It's an approved road.
okay, we're tacking past each other.
Is this a normal thing? So if there's a pre-approved subdivision that goes through and somebody wants to add one more subdivision to that, do you do this at every?
Sure.
At every-
We have to review the subdivision under our current regulations, which could have changed over the last 20 years. Absolutely.
We've requested for the road to be widened and to be improved. And in this case, it's potentially 25% increase in traffic on the road with another house, another 10 trips a day. So there's rationale
And this is for private roads that you typically do this on?
where there's safety, particularly where it's being raised by staff.
Typically, Lisa, as new lots get added, roads get widened as a part of successive subdivision reviews. In this case, it's a function of, is the width appropriate for one additional house? But it's
Yeah.
also a function of, as I think you can understand from the comments, but also from the decisions, there was this leftover issue to be addressed at a later time after the original subdivision that never got addressed. The zoning office never worked with you on it after 2000?
We were approved by Rocky Martin, came up and approved everything.
Right, and Rocky's letter says, and you gotta come back by June 1st of 2001 to address the approach to the town road. So in this case, it's a question both of an additional lot and what that demands for road improvements, if anything. And also this old issue that was never resolved, which has to do with safety.
Can the Public Works Director create a condition for the DRB? That wasn't a condition of the approval. There were 4 conditions.
Well, it was a condition of the November 2000 Planning Commission decision. He's quoting from that decision, which Mitch put a copy of that in the Dropbox, so you probably have it. It was one of those. That's why he called it out. Now, I will just add a little wrinkle. It's beyond the 15-year mark, so we can't enforce it as a zoning violation.
Alex, enforcement is a different issue from approval.
Yes, I was gonna
going
clarify.
forward on a
I
subdivision.
was gonna clarify, our office can't enforce that condition right now, but as a function of this new subdivision review, it's clearly a significant issue. So that's why it's, coming back.
Was it because we did add a flat spot at the bottom, pull-off. It's 38 feet by 20 feet, can fit 3 cars.
Yeah, and I think the Planning Commission approval in 2000 and Rocky Martin's memo mentions that the pull-offs, which were going to be on both sides of the road, I
Yep.
believe, was the short-term solution to allow the project to go forward with the condition that by June 1st, 2001, the long-term solution of relocating the actual access to Pond Road would you come back with a plan. That's the part that never happened.
And might I add just one more comment, and I know this came up way back when, 20 years ago, was when we bought this 53 acres, which I think was an original 70-40?
74,
79.
according to staff reports, yeah.
That first 100 yards was a pre-existing road that was approved.
Yeah, there's a real lengthy history
so,
to
I mean-
the previous owner and what they developed.
And we've had
and-
no issues with it.
It probably wasn't our planning commission's
Yeah.
finest moment.
Yeah, but I mean,
35 years
we
ago.
really have had no issues with that bottom of the road.
No accidents at all.
20 years.
Yeah.
And we've had 13
Every time I drive
teenagers that
by
we
it, I
raised.
gasp when I look at it,
Well,
but I'm not sure that's our,
I mean,
that
Jerry
is not our issue
Wetzel
right now.
has the same grade to his
We have
driveway.
emergency vehicles who say they can't get up there
Yeah.
sometimes of the year. And that's,
And how is changing the bottom gonna fix that?
it's not gonna fix that. I'm saying you have to prove to get this subdivision that you can get emergency vehicles up there 12 months of the year. Maybe you don't have to do it now if you don't subdivide, but if you want to subdivide, you have to do that. And that's gonna require some
We've
kind of
had emergency vehicles up
reconfiguration.
there in January. We had several years ago that we had a fire.
The fire department is saying, well, yeah, and maybe it was 60 degrees, I don't know. But the fire department is saying they can't guarantee emergency access year-round. And our regulations say in that circumstance, you can't approve.
So you have two issues you're talking about, not just one. You're talking about the bottom of the road and emergency access to the top
Yeah.
in the wintertime.
They're definitely issues. Those are both
Well,
issues.
and to
in play for
clarify-
Subdivision in my mind.
To clarify, the fire chief didn't dissect the road. We just asked him, do you have access issues? Because we all know it's a steep road. And he said, yes. So we didn't go into greater detail with him. We could, about which section of the road is the most problematic and is driving that feedback. But just to be clear, he didn't specify it's the beginning of the road, it's the middle, or it's the end. He just said, that's a very steep road. We can't guarantee emergency services during inclement weather. Yeah.
But yes, there were multiple issues, and that's what the staff comment raises. The
Got it.
first three issues are all about the road.
Might add, we also get trash removal service up there 365 days a year. I mean, they come up, and I think maybe once last year they did not come, but they,
I think you deal with
That's better
multiple.
than on my road, which is a.
yeah, I mean, like
You
most
deal
of
with
the
that
roads
in
in
multiple spots in
Hinesburg.
Hinesburg already. I mean, this is, it doesn't seem like you're applying that same thing across the board in Hinesburg to me. I mean, I could show you 10 roads that exist today that have the same issue, so.
We have not approved a subdivision since I've been on this board as a subdivision board in 2000, the early aughts, where emergency said they could not get out. We've never had that presentation.
All right, ready to move on?
Yes, we are. I'm probably gonna skip a few things because I don't wanna beat the dead horse. I think we know where we stand on the road issue in terms of whether it's approved or not. So in staff comment number 3, there's information regarding lack of drainage, and in addition, due to the apparent changes to the roadway, a verification of the road grades meeting the 15% limit should be required. So we have not prepared that plan to date, but we have surveyed the road and we have confirmed that the road does meet that requirement. There are some places where it's very close to 15%, but it never exceeds 15%. And we would certainly be willing to provide a profile showing those grades as part of the final plan submittal.
That would be super helpful.
Yeah.
What about the
drainage?
And the width?
To the best of our knowledge, the roadway width meets the rules. We would go back and measure that specifically. You know, we were looking at this from the standpoint of we have an approved road, the road's been approved. So if that's a real issue, if the width is the real issue for you folks and want us to confirm that, we will go out and measure it.
But it also has to be maintained as a road.
oh, it's been
And
maintained.
if sometimes creep occurs and
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's not uncommon that this board hears of roads that were built to a certain width, and over time, vegetation has grown in around the edges, so it appears to be less
Sure.
wide
That's
than
what
it
we had
actually
envisioned.
is.
Yeah.
And so when you measure it, you can report on, what's really there in terms of the base. I did take a drive up since I was subbing for Mitch tonight, and I didn't take a tape measure. Mitch did. That's why he said it's not 18 feet in some spots, so it'd be good to verify that. But I could verify that the drainage along the sides is in need of work. I mean, there's a heaved culvert near the Pond Road intersection, next to the pull-off. There's a
Yeah.
black culvert that's coming out of the ground and,
Yeah, we had someone
Someone's
park
offloading
his
an excavator.
excavator
Yeah,
and he
just dug it
tore it
up.
up.
And he's gonna fix
so
it.
is
That was-
there no issue about water kind of sheeting off? It's kind of coming down at a pretty, kind of like a ski jump.
We had the greatest test in the world last
gradient.
week.
Yeah,
There was nothing across the road.
So I drove it on Friday because we had that big
Yeah.
storm, and I wanted to see whether Dynamite Hill was in Pond Road, because that has happened in the past with Mount Pritchard Road, and I think Dynamite Hill Road, I just remember, I don't know if it was 8 years ago or
Maybe
9
before
years
we put
ago,
those-
there was a lot of road material out in the town road after an enormous storm. Anyways, I went up on Friday thinking the same thing, this is gonna be the test. I was impressed. There
So the
wasn't-
western ditches must be very robust.
There wasn't much erosion of material into the town road. There was runoff into the town road, but largely that was due to the fact that the culvert that goes under Dynamite Hill Road is plugged. And so water builds up where your mailboxes are and then sheets out into the road. What was actually coming down Dynamite Hill Road was being handled. With that said, and you know, Ben's the engineer here, so he could take a better look at it. It was my feeling that the ditch work along the sides just really needed some improvement. I don't know that there was a lot of,
Is that the town's response, or are we talking about on the
on
property?
Dynamite Hill Road, no, on the private road, that many of the ditches are not fully maintained, and you've got some runoff happening in the road itself.
Who's responsible for the culvert on road?
The town.
Yes.
So that, yeah, typically the town is responsible for that. However, the reason it's plugged is because of material that has come off Dynamite Hill Road. So I don't know if you've had conversations with the highway foreman about when that's gonna get fixed or how it should get fixed and whether that's gonna be a recurring issue, but yeah, that typically, once a culvert goes in, the town
That's
takes
over.
over maintenance of it.
Yeah, and that's been over a long time that's developed like that.
I figured it
don't
must have been
think
quite a while,
They've
yeah.
done anything to that culvert in a long time.
But it seems reasonable to be able to do some maintenance to that ditch if you want. I don't think that seems like an insurmountable task. I know, like, yeah, you guys have an association anyways, right, that puts money in every year and maintains the road, so.
Yeah, my drive up the road, the surface of the road seemed very well maintained. It was the edges of the road and the actual ditches along it that looked like they hadn't been tended to very well of late.
I think we can address that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Moving forward here, comment number 4, the location of Dynamite Hill Road does not match the easement location shown on the recorded plans. I agree, it does not, but that was not the intention of the design from the beginning. I'll show you in the easement documents that this is considered a floating easement. So this easement is created on paper, shown in a specific location, but then it actually is relocated using the same width dimension depending on where the road actually is constructed. And the goal there was for the applicant to ensure that the actual construction of the road and the profile of the road didn't exceed 15%. So I can help you folks see that. So this is a page out of that original deed here, and here's the language that's highlighted that says that the said right-of-way may deviate from said 50-foot right-of-way as shown in the above-mentioned survey, if it's necessary to do so in order for that grade of said driveway not to exceed 15 degrees.
So the owner of the property that is closest to Pond Road could have a regraded driveway coming through his or her property.
Based on this note, the driveway was able to be relocated. Is there, let me look at the
With regard to lot 2 of the 4-lot subdivision, right? That's what that deed language is referring to?
That's the one that
yes,
primarily contains the access?
yes,
Well,
correct.
lot 2 is there, but.
Well, no, it's for, well, this roadway is shown going through this lot here, but it's for the entire profile of the lot, and I would expect that where we would find the most deviation is in the steepest portions of the
Yeah, I
profile.
think, there's an S-curve
Yeah.
that was introduced to deal with the grades, and it's in that steepest section where the contour lines are closest together, right?
Yeah.
So that's not lot 2, that's lot 1 plus a portion of the land that wasn't part of the subdivision in the first place, right?
Right, but it was always intended to have a roadway built on it. So, just wanted to clarify that staff comment that that was the intention of the design.
Yeah, and I can confirm that I've been here for 17 years and we've never gotten any complaints from surrounding landowners that the Daggetts had done something they weren't supposed to do on their property. And in fact, I think in 2013, someone from the state was working with the town on addressing runoff going into Lake Iroquois, and we were looking at Dynamite Hill Road and the drainage coming off that and into the town road. And the state person had looked at the Act 250 files and didn't see the S-curve in those plans either, and actually talked with the Hartwicks, I think, which are the folks who are at the bottom right along Pond Road. They are, if you're looking up Dynamite Hill Road, they are the property to your left. And the comment in the email correspondence was that they had met with them and said, yes, when the S-curve was created, they started seeing more erosion onto their lawn. But they felt like it had been done for the right reason, and they, didn't appear to be upset about it.
Anybody else have any questions regarding that issue? The next staff comment is relevant to sufficient water supply. So this project will require a state of Vermont wastewater and potable water supply permit. The goal here is to have an on-site septic system, but also to drill a well. So we opened up the town rules here regarding water supply, and it's the same kind of language we would see in virtually every town regarding the applicant's responsibility to provide the town with evidence that there's a sustainable water source. And the applicant plans to accommodate that request the same way we would on a normal project in any other community by having a driller go to the site, which they've already hired a driller to go to the site, and they went there with the zoning administrator, I believe, was present for that. And the well driller will drill the well and determine what the flow rate is and whether any storage is required. And we also went to the original subdivision approval, and we pulled this language out of here regarding water supply condition, and we would expect that the town would have a condition similar to this, which the applicant is well aware of and more than willing to accommodate.
So Mitch's report references 3 wells in the area that have 0 capacity. Are they really dry?
I don't know, Greg, that's a good question, but that is the reason this is an issue highlighted in the report. Because it's in an area of known low well yields, as indicated on in the town plan map, and because there are surrounding wells of 0 yield, this is typically what triggers your conversation about this during the subdivision review, as opposed to just creating a lot and hoping that water will come, once the lot is there, and so I don't know, Greg, if those
So
are
I
exact
assume
0 or
these
exact
are-
dry, but I would assume so, unless they've been further worked on.
I assume, I don't recall approving any subdivisions in this area except maybe right at the front along this Pond Road 10 years ago, but we certainly didn't approve anything where there was no proven water supply.
So I think one not recent, but one example that's noteworthy, you might remember, is when George Bedard proposed a subdivision on Texas Hill Road, and he had still has about a 40-acre property there, and many of the landowners around came to express concern. He originally proposed a 16-lot subdivision and then whittled it down to 8, but many of the landowners around there came concerned that having that level of development would impact their already very fragile and low yield wells, and there was similar evidence that there were 0 yield wells around that one.
I don't remember 0 yield.
You don't remember that? Okay.
0 yield? No.
Yeah, I believe there were, and the way we approached it in that case was not to approve the subdivision and just require that they find water before they build, because then you've created a useless lot, but rather to have the developer come with some sort of a engineered solution. Either drill the well ahead of the approval of the subdivision, which is a lot of money for them to have to lay out, or come to the table with some sort of innovative storage solution such that you might be able to take any existing well on the site and use it for the proposed home and the existing home.
So, can I shed some light on it? I met with Claude Chevalier, who's pretty well respected. I'm sure you've all heard of him or dealt with him probably.
He walked the site, you actually walked the site with myself, Roger, and Mitch. And by the way, I'm not only the builder, we'll be partnering financially, so I'm putting my money on the table in Hinesburg to build a house with Roger and Lisa, so I have a vested interest in this. We are definitely willing to invest in proving there's water to that lot, and it's a pretty fair bet for me because you've created a 4-lot subdivision, every which of those homes has water. So it's a safe bet. And meeting with Claude, he looked at different well tables and felt like the higher we got onto the ridge, the safer we're going to be. That the water on the other side, at the top of the ridge, I guess, I don't know who your landowner is above you, well, to your northeast, yeah, their water is much better. So his opinion was we were actually in pretty good shape. And again, we're willing to put,
Certainly drilling the well in advance of having approval for the lot as a part of this review process is ironclad. You know, if there's a well with a demonstrated yield,
generally,
this issue is gone, but typically that happens after the subdivision approved.
again, generally speaking, Claude wants to see a permit before we drill the
There are probably
well.
more critical conditions than water.
Yeah, I mean, we're willing, all I'm saying is we're willing to, I think for both of us, right, we're willing to invest in that well. We know we have to before you even give us a building permit, so we can't build a house without a well, so we're willing to take that risk as
A
landowners.
question for Alex there is that our regs are basically saying that we need to not impact existing water supplies. How are we gonna know that?
You're not.
There's no enforcement.
That's pretty language in a regulation that's impossible to demonstrate. And neighboring landowners oftentimes bring that concern up, and unfortunately,
There's no credible proof on any
yeah,
of these points.
what happens underneath the ground and all those little fissures that decides where water goes, it's very hard to know. But what I would emphasize is that, whereas typically you have evidence that there's likely to be water, you can't know for sure, but likely to be water, and you allow the lot to be created on that evidence, it's tenuous to allow a lot to be created where there's evidence that there may not be adequate water, because if you do create it and then you do your investment and come up dry, you've just approved a lot that is, can't be developed for its intended purpose. And that's where you want to be careful about cart and horse and making sure this issue gets addressed to your satisfaction before you give a final approval. We're at sketch, so we're just trying to lay out all the issues, plenty of time.
To close on that, not to be dead horse, Chevalier is willing, by the way, to drill a well without a permit of the subdivision
On the pretext that it has some ancillary benefit to the existing landowner. So we would do that. If that's a condition you all impose on us, we'll go ahead and do
can
that.
make that happen.
Absolutely.
That's good to know.
Very good. Moving on to the deer wintering area and core wildlife habitat. Staff acknowledges that this project really doesn't raise any concerns. There were some concerns regarding the 4-lot subdivision, but they were on other lots that we're not proposing improvements on. And as another point, this project, as we saw in the plan, proposes to construct the building in a location that's generally been cleared already. So we're not anticipating that any significant loss of deer wintering area as part of this project.
So, looking at the one resource map, unless I wasn't looking at the fill patterns right, it looked like lot 4, a good, like eastern half of it, looked like it had, I think it was deer wintering. Do you have that, the resource map?
Yeah, we can bring that up. Here, let me take that back.
It was core resource and deer wintering area. It's
Yeah.
hard, it's overlapping, I don't really understand.
Yeah, it was like, one was to the east and one was to the west. But it wasn't devoid, lot 4 was not devoid of it, and these maps change over time. So, whatever the guy was using for maps or analysis in 2000, things change. So, I don't know when the last time these were updated.
Well, so Dick, I can tell you that definitely for the wild deer wintering habitat, those maps are published by Vermont Fish and Wildlife. We use them, however, they are very much old and inaccurate and meant to be sort of a very broad level red flag, not sort of like wetland maps that we use. We have very broad level wetland mapping. We don't know where the actual boundary of the wetland is. We have to have a delineation done. It's very much the same with deer wintering areas. But I think the applicant's accurate in that at least a portion of the building envelope, the eastern portion that they show here, is already cleared. There can't be deer wintering habitat in an area where there was a wind turbine and there's no more vegetation. Whether it extends over into the western portion of the building envelope, I don't really know.
We might take the opportunity now to add that the next comment is regarding the building envelope and how it goes to the west in an area that has excessively steep slopes, and suggest that we trim that to not include that in the building envelope, and we've already added that to our file, and we can easily accommodate that. It still leaves a little more than a half an acre of a building envelope, so we have plenty of room to accommodate that comment, which again, continues to alleviate any issues with deer wintering area. That's an extremely steep slope. I
This-
seriously doubt that
this area over here.
that there's any deer wintering going on in that cliff area there.
So how does the lot is the red lot, the proposed lot? is
Correct.
The red line?
Yeah.
Yep.
So how does this meet any front of, what's the front of the lot? I mean, it's completely enclosed.
It's
other
a,
lots.
yeah, it's a landlocked property with no road frontage, and that's allowed in our regs. You can have up to 2 of them at the end of a right of way. So it's okay, it doesn't have to have frontage. Like I said, you're allowed to have up to 2 of them.
So how do we define the front yard? Is the front yard the side that's facing the driveway?
So the way that front yard is measured when a property is landlocked and is accessed by a right-of-way is a little different. So where the right-of-way would enter the lot, I'm not sure exactly where that is, somewhere in here, is we measure it from where it enters the lot and we do a radius. So 60 feet is the front yard setback and we do a radius from where it enters 60 feet and a sweep. So it looks like kind of a semicircle of a front yard setback. Yeah, this is not unusual. We deal with this at the end of dead-end private roads with some regularity, and that's how that works. The regs do limit how many of these you can have at the end of a road, but this proposal's fine in that regard. I think that Mitch's comments were, on the natural resource front, were to make you aware of the situation, but also to recognize that where this is proposed, and as Ben said, because of the steep slopes, this is very much nibbling at the edges of a resource area that, is questionable in terms of deer wintering. And that's pretty much what our regulations talk about. Had this not been steep slopes and they proposed to put this building up here somewhere, I think we would have made a stronger point of it in the staff report that that's probably not compliant with the regs. But what they proposed is not far from the existing driveway.
The 2000 letter from Fish and Wildlife was pretty strongly worded, but I think the applicant's done an effort to minimize those adverse impacts, but I'd be more worried about subdivision on lot 3 and 2 by the looks.
Those were concerns lies.
And Ben, my understanding from, and this subdivision is lots of complicated stuff in our files, but Act 250 was referred to several times, so I think this is an Act 250 project. Do you know?
No, we are going to submit a jurisdictional opinion request to Stephanie Monahan at the
Okay.
commission, because this is an unusual one in that the jurisdiction was based on the length of the road.
Yes.
And that's what triggered jurisdiction, but that trigger doesn't exist anymore. So Act 250 cared about the development of this road.
Right.
But under today's rules wouldn't. It's up to them to tell us. A lot of times Act 250 jurisdiction doesn't go away. It generally doesn't.
I'll tell you,
But-
we had a similar experience with Hawk Lane, which is a road here in the village area off of Mechanicsville. It's an Act 250 subdivision because of road length, and it will always be until we can get the legislature to fix that provision. So I think if it was in, it'll always be in, I'm only saying that because this deer wintering area, even if we think it's, being dealt with decently, you'll definitely need to address it with Vermont Fish and Wildlife for the Act 250 process. So getting that figured out sooner rather than later is probably a good thing.
Sure, and what we've experienced in situations like this too is that if we were going to change the length of the road, then that would be something that the commission would want to review. But because that was the trigger and we're not proposing any changes to the length or any major expansions of that road, this could be considered a minor amendment or an administrative amendment, which could just be a letter from one of the district coordinators. But of course, that's up to them to decide.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if this was done as a minor revision to the Act 250 permit, even though a new building lot is proposed.
I wouldn't be surprised either. Okay, utilities. There's a staff comment here regarding the existing utilities are provided with above-ground poles. The 2000 subdivision approval required utility lines to be placed underground as per the requirements of HSR. We should discuss this at the hearing. So it's my understanding that the first 600 to 700 feet of Dynamite Hill Road included underground utilities, but then at that time, the applicant faced ledge condition and went above ground to poles, all the way to the interface between Lot 3 and Lot 4. And as part of the goals for this project, we would go underground from that point forward.
So was the above-ground installation consistent with the approval, or was that a maverick?
I think it was a waiver. I think it was one of those conditions, as Ted said, and Ted, you were here, right, when this happened?
He was there, that was a different board. This was not the DRB.
No, but the planning commission was, I think, if I remember correctly, because I've reviewed this project several times, that the applicant came back to the planning commission at least once or twice and said we couldn't do what we thought we were gonna be able to do. I believe that the above-ground utilities was one of the things the planning commission approved. Do you remember, Ted, or do you see it in the 2000 approval?
I do not remember.
Don't remember?
Wouldn't there be an application in the file?
Well, it'd be recorded in the meeting minutes, and so the decision, the 2000 decision, which was in your packet, lists all the revisions from the original 98 decision, and so it's just a matter of looking back. I'll find out.
Okay.
Very good.
So you're saying any proposed utility extension would be underground?
That would be, yes, that's my understanding, with the applicant's desires there.
Sorry, just so I'm clear, so you said it goes from pole back underground at the Lot 4 property line?
I could show you where, if you want to see. I'll show you our plan. I've already met with Velco. Maybe a lack of not using the pointer. It's taking a while to navigate that. The existing, what is here? So the pole, property line, here we go. So we're right here is a power pole, and we would go, make sure I went there, it's right here. We're gonna go, it's actually over here. We would go straight and then follow the road directly on the road up and then into our lot underground. So it's about 600 feet to a point here, which we'd have a transformer that we go into, we have the transformer with secondary. Actually, I'm off, here we go, off the chart. So we come in here, down the road, and there's already an existing clearing here, kind of a, where I think at some point there was a power source or something put in. So it follows the boundary line. All the way
So
up.
the utilities to the existing house are currently
Yeah,
underground?
so, I was off here, so you think we're looking at, there's an existing pole somewhere right in this, right on the property line. So we're gonna go right up the property line, right up the road, right into the lot that way. It's a total of about 750 feet.
The condition, or excuse me, staff comment number 11, proposed 50-foot right-of-way extension. So again, we're not proposing to extend the roadway right-of-way. There will be an easement that will be granted from the current owner of Lot 4 to the proposed owner of Lot, what will be then be Lot 4-2. It'll be an access easement that will extend along the existing driveway, starting at the interface between Lots 3 and 4, or the end of the 50-foot right-of-way, and that easement will grant access to the future owners of Lot 4-2.
What about number 10? Lot configuration.
What did I skip?
The irregular lot?
Oh, we had discussed that earlier regarding the C shape of the lot and how there was about 100-foot section as a requirement in the town rules. I think the staff is just commenting.
And why the owner wanted to retain the, the western or the northwestern portion?
Right.
Couldn't that be accomplished by easements or something like that just as well? If they wanted to maintain access to the back?
We also wanted to just keep it at 3 acres, so, you know, to kind of avoid, you know, where the house is now, avoids that steep, that 100 feet back there is all really, really steep. So, just trying to avoid.
Yeah, Lisa, I was just thinking, you know, if you're gonna own this steep hillside, and your house is down here, are you, like, do you have the ability to get up there and do much? You said there's a ATV trail of some sort?
Yeah,
There's mountain bike trails out through there, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I remember when I first looked at it, I just thought, well, why not just divide the property right here? And then this person has the benefit of these wild and woolly areas, and you have the benefit down here, but you want to retain
That's a
that.
6 acre, yeah.
Recreation piece. There's actually a number of mountain bike trails cut all through there. Yeah.
I'm guessing the 100 feet or the lack thereof is what's going across the top of the new lot.
Yep,
And
this
so how
is,
far off are we? Is it
No.
95 feet? Is it 80 feet?
We have
no, it's 100.
Oh, it is 100?
Yeah, Mitch's staff report says it meets that minimum.
Oh.
But we still had questions about whether, you know, this made more sense with the
It's still a
proposed
regular
lot.
lot.
Right, it's just an irregular lot. And typically, if this was usable land, forest land that maybe was being managed for timber or what have you, we would be saying, let's make sure that this is where your logging road is and you can actually get access to and manage that. Given the slopes, I'm guessing there's no real management going on there anyways, right? It's just like you said,
There is a logging road.
but there is a logging road nonetheless, is that somewhere?
Yeah, it's an
in there?
extension. If you take that driveway, it follows the stone wall on the property line. And there's an existing logging road that goes back about halfway, I would say. And if I'm understanding it right, just based on Roger's history, in the original subdivision, when he was involved, there were some comments somewhere along the way, public comments about town residents had used some of those mountain bike trails in the past, and Roger and Lisa have maintained them and never posted to property. I don't think anybody ever shows up to mountain bike, and it never stopped people from using it that have wanted to.
Very intrepid mountain bikers with those slopes.
You gotta want to climb the hill first.
Number 12, the turnaround. I guess from a design point of view, we were considering our options here. We noted in the rules that obviously a cul-de-sac is allowed, but there's also some language regarding not using a cul-de-sac. And in the interest of trying to not cut as many trees up here and not taking up as much room with this large impervious surface, we would propose a turnaround that we would tailor to the size of the fire apparatus that the town fire department had, and we would use turning templates to prove to the fire department that there was appropriate room to turn around in a configuration that minimized impact of that area up there.
Well, that's something that always can be done at final. You just recognize that it's part of the regulations.
Yeah, hammerhead is what we typically recommend, but Ben's right, that can be worked out.
Yep.
Going back to the original issue at hand was the roadway design and the emergency access. Going back to the 2000 approval, the condition number 9 discusses the width of the road, but also talks about the need for that turnaround. So I think it's all tied in together.
Sure. Well,
Doesn't the driveway for lot 4-2 make a natural
It sure does.
turnaround?
Yeah, I don't know what Ben would think as the designer, but it seems like a logical place to have
Yes.
the turnaround right at those.
And that
It would be-
qualify as a turnaround?
Oh, yeah, we see that typically,
As long as it's not too much of a Y.
right, it's just gotta have the right geometry.
we had envisioned there being a driveway that teed off of that, and we would make it the radii wide enough and long enough and large enough so that we could prove to the town that the fire apparatus was able to turn around using that access point.
The garbage trucks will be happy with that too.
Yeah. So while we're talking about access for emergency services, I guess what would be really helpful for the applicant is to get an exact understanding of what improvements does the town want to see, so that they can decide if it's feasible to make those changes to move forward with this subdivision.
I think it would make sense to talk to the fire chief for one, see what, he's the professional. I would think that would be my first step. I would.
And
talk to
I
him.
think close conversations with Mitch, who's an engineer. I have no objection to the subdivision in principle. I just think this whole roadway access issue is critical. And if you can work it out with the engineers, I'll probably be fine with it. But we as a board, I don't think are going to give you really terribly helpful input. I think Mitch laid out the issues under our regulations. Those are what are going to be informing our deliberations, I think. So if you can work it out with Mitch, you're probably going to work it out with us, but that's the place to start. And the emergency vehicle access is critical.
So if I'm hearing you folks correctly, I think what
I
we
think
would...
Ted wanted to weigh in.
And the flat entry on the Plum Road is
I think that's really important.
Critical open issue for me.
Yeah, we've required other developments to really improve the access and.
But the issues we have with stormwater, I'm not sure why the culvert hasn't been fixed under that road.
I mean, either, I couldn't answer that for you.
But I mean, that's definitely something, maybe it needs to be bigger, I don't know.
Well, there
I'm not-
was talking here about whether it needed to be bigger.
Right.
Talks about 24 or 36, but evidently somewhere along the line, we decided whatever's there is big enough.
Well, I've worked with
Well, those are
talked to
two,
the town foreman too and
Yeah.
discussed that.
those are two different culverts. The decision is referring to
Oh, it
the
is.
culvert under Pond Road, which is to the south
that's
of the
right.
driveway.
Yep.
The fear was that this road was so steep, there was gonna be so much erosion and water volume that 24-inch culvert under Pond Road might need to be enlarged, and that's why that condition was in there.
Right.
So that's
It's
heading
been
down
almost
toward
20
Lake
years.
Iroquois.
I don't know, that heads towards Lake Iroquois. I don't know if that culvert was replaced at some point by the town, but that's what that was about. This other culvert that we were talking about is actually the one under Dynamite Hill Road.
Yep.
And that's the one that's plugged at the moment.
So I think the conversation with the fire chief is important because it could be perception of gradient. And then also just the roadway surface, if there's a particular spot that doesn't get the sun and it doesn't warm and it gets icy, those are the kind of things that could be just practical fixes.
Are times, some roads, the chief would say, there's no guarantee, and that can have sometimes be right in the deed saying there's no guarantee of fire protection.
We can probably say that on Texas Hill sometime.
There's some locations, yeah.
Yeah, so I think it'd be fair between both, just what I got from Mitch's comments, it sounded like he felt there were spots that were steep beyond the 15%.
Right.
You guys said you looked at it and you don't think so. So, being more specific, getting more specific comments from both, Mitch and the fire chief as to what in particular is the issue. The end of the road, it seems like, is it off of Pond Road? They're like below Iroquois, where there's some steep driveways coming down there. I thought there had been some requirements that at least a portion of that be paved in order to try to keep gravel from flowing into the ditch, flowing into the road.
Well, we made one be flat. I can't remember that we made it be paved.
We actually talked about pavement in the 2000 decision as if you can't, the direction is to go make it flat.
Okay.
But that if there's some mitigating circumstances, that pavement might be a solution, but flat.
If you're
flat
talking
is
about
first.
slipperiness, I would actually say from experience on Baldwin Road that trying to stop going downhill on an icy day on pavement is harder than on gravel.
Yeah. We actually have we've upgraded our road in the
So
past.
I'm not sure that's an option.
What is it that we put on it? Do you know what it's like a sure pack? It actually packs down.
It's a black
very-
shale, we're getting out of Moncton from Parker.
Well,
Just
we don't
packs a
need
lot
to
harder.
debate all these fine things.
Oh,
I think
I'm
there's a
just
lot
letting you know
of
that
engineering
it's on
work
there now.
and conversation to be had going forward.
And I'm happy to, have Mitch or myself dig through the original approval some more to give you the context of where this desire to work with the LaCroix, I guess. Greg LaCroix is the current landowner who's at the bottom of Dynamite Hill Road. As you're looking up Dynamite Hill Road, I believe his property is the one on the right. That's the property that was anticipated to be where Dynamite Hill would move. It would move into his property and then come come out onto Pond Road further towards St. George and Williston than it does now. So I can get you that background information. In fact, Greg LaCroix was in front of this board in, I think, 2004.
10 years ago, we were doing a
He wanted to subdivide his property, and he only went as far as sketch, but
and there was an issue about water, if memory serves me.
well, that and this road issue, because it was fresh in your minds that Dynamite Hill was supposed to have been relocated as a long-term solution. Your sketch plan approval back then to the LaCroix proposal was to do that. He never came back for a final, and that subdivision never happened. But I can dig all that up and just give you the context of why there's all this conversation about a long-term solution that never got looked at.
So was it the situation that it couldn't be flattened without doing that? Without relocating?
That's a huge expense.
Yeah, there's not enough, where it comes in now, the grade is such that I think of it this way. They introduced the S-curve halfway up the road to better address the grade issue. Gotta do something similar at the bottom. It can't just be a straight shot up from Pond Road. Otherwise, you have these grade issues.
So
And
could
and our
you-
regs talk about, or at least our driveway standards talk about, having a reasonably level area in the first X number of feet as you approach a town road, so you don't have vehicles sliding into the road. And they just can't do it where it's currently located. That's why the thought was, maybe move it further onto LaCroix property.
And I'm assuming the LaCroix property was not part of this original subdivision. It was.
Well, I think the history of it, as Greg was
Going back to
pointing out, is
88
that I
maybe.
think it was. I think that was
And there are easements on his property, I
Those would be
think.
3 lots.
I think it was an existing house that was there as the only
Yeah,
house
that's an
on the
old
lot.
house. That's an old farmhouse.
And then they started this subdivision process, and I think Ted's right. I think there was, some early time when you didn't need subdivision approval, and then the Daggetts came along later.
Well, I think when Connie, I'm sorry, forgot the lady who owned it, yeah, it was originally 200 acres, but I think she had approval for that existing road. So when we purchased it, that first 100 yards was already pre-approved as a road.
Yeah, the history is long and sordid, for sure. And I'm happy to try to dig some of that up, but Greg's point is a good one, that this subdivision will be reviewed on its merits, given the current situation. If there's deficiencies, you just have to address them, for this subdivision.
But it's
Dan,
also,
could I suggest we see if anybody from the public has any comments, and then we could maybe talk about next steps forward on this application?
Yeah, I think you're ready for comment.
I do, I just, we have an existing lot to work with, and we don't know that we have any more right of way to go on someone else's property. So I guess what I'd love to hear for our engineers, because we're paying them to address these comments, is I'm not sure that I have, given what we have to work with, which is already your existing subdivision with homes on it, nothing's changed there. How do you picture the entrance being different given what we have to work with? Because we can't go to somebody and say, will you sell this part of your land, or can we get it? That's just not even.
Well, I'm hearing the engineers say that there are easements on the other landholders that give you guys the right to move it around.
Do we know that to be true, Ben?
No, I think that I can dig into this further, but it's my understanding that the intent was, once the road was built, that's the location of the floating easement.
I have imagined we're gonna face a legal battle.
Yeah.
For sure, which will be
Okay,
passed
well, that's a lot
on.
of stuff to be sorted out, because in my mind, something
Well, I
has
was
to be
just
done.
saying that will be passed
Probably a
on, as we have an
location
existing
on-
property that you all approved for 4 houses to live on, and nothing's changed. We still have to, as common sense, we need you to look at what we have to work with now, and I'm asking you, based on that, how do you see the road looking different, the entrance to the road looking different?
Well, I guess I'm looking at it as moving, and I think that's what was contemplated.
Is moving for the
18 years
purpose
ago.
of less of a grade, or is
Creating a
it,
new road?
what's,
Well,
Yeah,
yeah,
so-
well, to accomplish what's
So
required.
let me
in our
explain a little bit of
regulations.
that history. I think the understanding was that here's Pond Road,
yeah,
here's the town line, here's Dynamite Hill, there's that S-curve. The lot we're talking about is up here, but I'm focused
Yeah.
down here by this portion.
right.
So, when it was approved by Planning Commission in 2000, they had several conditions that have been highlighted, and one of them had to do with this initial segment. And the short-term solution that was approved was put some pull-offs on both sides, with the understanding that then you would come back later and propose a longer-term solution. This was a short-term fix. And the preferred long-term solution that I think at the time both the road foreman and the director of public works were pushing for was that the road would not come out onto Pond Road here, it would come out somewhere over here. That the road would literally move and sweep, because to the north, it's much flatter.
And whose property is that?
This whole road is on the LaCroix property. There's the house right there. So you have, the Daggetts and the rest of the landowners up here have an easement across the LaCroix property to travel on. So yeah, it would absolutely require negotiation with this landowner, who, as I indicated, back in 2004, put a proposal in to subdivide this property and to create another building lot. And during that process, this issue came up again. And the movement of this road was discussed and having it be, sweeping in some fashion. I'm not sure exactly how, but in some fashion, over here.
Create a whole new
Can-
road.
Yeah, that was what was contemplated at the time.
Wow.
Um,
I mean,
so-
that's a huge expense.
Can you help us understand, and maybe we can dig into this, but what is the definition of a short-term approval in the town of Hinesburg?
Well, the short-term approval is what the planning commission issued. I mean, just read the 2000 decision. It's
Was there an expiration to it?
yes, June 1st of 2001 was when this short-term solution was supposed to.
Is it gonna hold up in court? Is it gonna hold up in court for you guys?
I think it
probably would. No, we might have to see.
It doesn't really matter because.
Well, it does.
It doesn't because you're adding another.
Yeah, you have
You're
to-
talking about adding another
But
lot to
we're not
this roadway.
changing
You have to get
We're not
approval under our
changing-
current regulations.
But we're not changing anything with that original, we're just subdividing a lot that's already
Right,
been.
the general sort of common sense reason behind this is if we have a bad situation, I know you don't see it as a bad situation because you've lived there for a long time and everything seems to work all right, but if we have a deficient situation, we don't want to make it worse. So if we have a road that the emergency services are difficult to provide on, we have to think very carefully about allowing more and more development on that road and putting more and more property at risk and more burden on the municipal services, for fire engines and ambulance to go off the road and,
So,
not be able to serve.
If we use that same common sense approach, and I'll close with this, I'll be quiet after this. You have the option of, we don't have to build a house up there, we can build houses other places, right? And so, A, you don't get the extra tax base, which maybe means nothing to you, but B, you have 4 existing lots there, they're gonna stay there, and those people are never gonna do a darn thing to that road other than what they have to. We're sitting here today saying, we'd like to work with you. I think moving the road entirely is absurd. And so you have an applicant that's saying, it does take a common sense approach to this if you want this development or you wanna help us. And we're willing to do certain things to widen the road, to make it in its existing form better. And that's, I think, your best case scenario, But short of that,
We'd like to work with you. I'm happy with the idea of another lot up there, but it has to be consistent with our regulations. I, for one, am not gonna bend the regulations just to cram this subdivision in. And I'm a lawyer, but I hesitate to ever recommend that an applicant talk to a lawyer. And I know you deal with a lot of quasi-legal issues in your engineering work, but it might be worth your time and trouble to talk briefly to an attorney about the validity of any approvals from 2000, just to kind of get a quick sense of the lay of the land on the legal issues surrounding what you're trying to do and what we may be allowed to do without investing a ton of money. From just my single perspective, you have really significant issues about the access under our current regulations, and I feel bound to apply those current regulations to this application. Maybe there are ways around it, I don't see it. Maybe some lawyer could guide me through it, but it might be worth your time, trouble, and your dime to at least have some conversation with a local land use lawyer about this kind of issue.
well, I think we will tomorrow, it's good advice, but I'm born and raised a Vermonter. I grew up going to town meetings. I think Vermonters inherently have a practicality and a logic to them that you can usually talk through. In this case, we want to put a house, we want to increase your tax base, we want to make the road better.
But we still
I'm not
have
asking, we're actually not
regulations, and I think
asking
everybody on the
rules.
board is gonna feel obliged to apply the regulations as they read them. And maybe they're subject to interpretation, maybe not, but I think you have real issues with
So
the
the
regulations.
regulation that we're talking about is,
Emergency access,
Yeah, specifically the development on a private right-of-way, review standard, as well as the subdivision review standard about municipal services.
okay.
So the two that are cited on staff comment number 1 are the two specific sections where this is difficult.
What is the gradient off of Pond Road? initial 200 feet.
Well, we're told it was
I know it's less than 15,
under 15%.
but right from the, I know it's pretty steep visually, but I'd, 7, 10, 12.
Without looking at it, I couldn't tell you, but.
Because that's what I.
drive up it, is that the steepest part?
No,
No.
I did try.
I guess that's what I would be interested more of Mike's focused impression, particularly on the southern piece, because I had a feeling that I was thinking the emergency access is not about the access close to Pond Road.
Yeah.
The emergency access is further in.
Right.
I'm curious,
How that would change?
these concerns at this lower
Yeah.
part.
There seems to be two different issues here. There's this 2001 change the location of the interface between Pond Road and Dynamite Hill Road, which really I don't believe has anything to do with the emergency access capabilities. But then there's the emergency access capabilities, and I think that we can tailor this project to accommodate all the emergency access capabilities. Changing the entire location of the roadway, what's the basis for it?
So we didn't say you had to, we said you needed a level portion as you entered, a flat stopping area at the bottom of the road. That's what we said. We didn't say you had to move the road to do that. You may have to move the road to do that, because if you have a flat section, your slope starts going up later on, right? Your grade gets steeper. So the direction was figure out a way to make it a flat intersection with Pond Road.
So that doesn't have anything to do with those two cited regulations? That's a different regulation of interface?
Do the town road standards not require some kind of flat area for?
So what the standard that we typically look to is the B71 standard, and it's applied during the approval process with the road foreman and formerly the select board for work within a town right-of-way. And your board typically just refers back to that to say, work with the road foreman and meet that standard so we can make sure cars aren't sliding out into the road. Or in the case of Shadow Lane, which is the steep road on the other side of Pond Road, cars are able to make it up and out of the road and not, have it be gunning it and, flying into traffic.
Can I just ask your recollection of all of you, it sounds like some of you have been serving for a long time. Do any of you recall having is there a precedent anywhere that you can remember where you have a private road and an existing subdivision, you've asked them to improve the road? Can you name another precedent?
way?
As you're doing here, as you're asking us to change the road direction or make some pretty major modifications?
Very frequent that the road width is required to be expanded. So let's say it goes in as a 3-lot subdivision and the road is 14 feet wide with some pull-offs for emergency vehicles. And then additional lots are proposed and the board says, okay, now you have enough traffic, it's gotta be 18 feet wide.
So there's other developments that
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I can't remember one in which there was a legacy issue about the road moving and that had to happen, but trust me, Dynamite Hill is a unique example. Just looking at the history of how it was proposed and then all the revisions that had to be requested because they couldn't meet the original design, that's unusual. We don't see very many projects that come back and say, well, we said we would do this, but we got up there and we realized we can't. Can we please meet a different standard? And then they got approval for that. And then, well, we still couldn't do this. Can we have, some forbearance? And so it's a unique situation.
So who was the original subdivider of those 4 lots?
You're looking at them. The Daggett's are.
So that condition that said you were supposed to come back by June 1st,
2001.
was to you?
I don't have a copy of that memo, but my recollection was that Rocky Martin signed off on all that.
Rocky Martin did not make that condition go away. He is unable to make that condition go
So
away.
that was my misinterpretation then of that memo, because we took that memo as, okay, and, we actually had him come up and make sure that all 4 of those, were.
So that condition, you're the ones who never met that condition, is the way I see it.
But I would like to see that memo.
I think the part that's
Says-
troubling is the very last sentence.
Well,
The road as installed from Pond Road is approved and accepted.
I think
Yeah, and I think
we're at
that's
the
what-
point of diminishing returns, and I'd like to invite our chairman to discuss with the applicant how we move forward. Because
I think we've
obviously
given you-
there's work to be done.
I would suggest.
Have we not given you enough direction of,
I would suggest, because it's a minor subdivision, I would suggest that we continue sketch plan to address these issues, not go, because the next step is final.
Yeah, I
but
would
I don't think we
also,
should go, I think you need more than just the next meeting, 2 weeks from now, right? You're gonna need more time than that.
Oh, absolutely.
So, do you have an idea?
Our schedule is
Open.
pretty open right now,
So do you have an idea when you'd like it, the next meeting?
Well, we definitely want to get in touch with the fire chief.
Yeah.
What is his availability like?
I can't speak for him because he's not here in the office 40 hours a week, but he's generally available, pretty available.
And the road foreman too, right?
Yeah, Mike, I can speak for even less, especially after last week's storm event. So it may take a few weeks
You might have to drive up there.
to
So-
get in front of Mike.
I think the question that the applicants might want answered, if it's possible tonight, is if the applicant is able to satisfy all the requirements of the road foreman and the fire chief, but is unable to accommodate or cannot feasibly accommodate this interface between Pond Road and Dynamite Hill Road, is it possible to get approval from the board for this project?
I would not approve that. We'd be picking a vote from my perspective.
Could we get a consensus from everybody on that? It really matters whether we put
No, I
our
understand.
resources. Does anybody else want?
I want to know,
I would like to see what you come up with.
yeah, I want to know what generated that initial concern in 2000. And I am sensitive that this is one more subdivision where there's others potentially in the future. We don't know if those are ever going to happen, so we can't be thinking about that, but it's potentially a 25% of increase in traffic, so you can't exactly just hold conditions as today. It could get worse and exacerbate. So I'm curious about the gradient and whether there's been issues observed. And I don't know whether it's the gradient that's been the issue or whether we're not complying with a standard of road design that has not been met. So I'm curious as to what was the precedent for 2000, what was that reason for the decision of that roadway recommendation?
And who would be able to provide us that answer?
Well, I think you need to decide what is the design today and does it meet all applicable design regulations today? As Greg said, we're under the rules and regulations as we are today.
Yeah, again, I can give you more of the history from minutes of the meetings and the various planning commission approvals and revisions. I'm happy to do that to help you, start to address John's question about where did the concern come from? What was driving it back in 2000? But ultimately, you're asking a good question, Ben. If we can get consensus from the town staff, fire chief, road foreman, and they are amenable to what we're proposing, will the board approve it? I don't think they can give you an answer because you need to show them what your proposal is, and that may vary depending on what those conversations result in. So,
But is it possible without changing the interface between Pond Road and Dynamite Hill Road?
and I don't think they can give you an answer because it depends on what the proposal is. I think what Greg was saying earlier was he's not opposed to there being a new lot up there if you can meet applicable standards.
And you can have cheap conversations with Mitch about this.
Sure.
You guys are engineers.
Yeah.
Put your heads together. Mitch knows exactly what our regulations are, and so forth.
Sure.
And we have great respect for his judgment.
And we can help make those meetings happen.
Sure.
Because they probably, as Greg's alluding to, probably would be best if Mitch were there, if that were a meeting
Sure.
with you and the fire chief and Mitch, or
Yeah,
you
we
and
might as
fire
well get
chief.
everybody together.
Yeah, because then it's where everyone can be on the same page, and if that, if one solution is minor improvements and everyone's happy, you can come back and, you're gonna have to explain that. If another one is paving a portion of the, road, which is the most difficult, maybe, you can come back with that. If another is reworking something within a right-of-way or outside of a right-of-way, those are all various options. Just gotta figure out which one makes the most sense, and then bring it back to these folks so they can say, yeah. Because ultimately, this is a board of 7, and they're community members, and their job is to say, okay, based on all the technical information, does it meet the regs as we understand it? And that's the beauty of having 7 minds, is they can disagree and, come to consensus. But yeah, I think the technical stuff needs to happen first before they can have that conversation.
I mean, we can continue it for like a month, and if in a month you still haven't had all the conversations, I mean, it can be
Continued again, absolutely, yeah. So if, your meetings in December are, I believe, December 3rd. Yeah, December 3rd and 17th. We are standing at November 5th. Do you have the way our scheduling works is that Mitch would want to see whatever information that you could collaborate on, and then write up a supplementary staff memo for, and prep for the next meeting to prep the board. So he would be wanting to, if it were the December 3rd meeting, he'd be wanting to do that the week prior.
Thanksgiving is right before that.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit of a monkey wrench. Seems a
Does-
little less optimistic to me.
Yeah, I was gonna
given the
say,
issues.
based on that, does December 17th, would you be amenable to that meeting as a continuation?
We prefer the earlier, but it's really up to Jeremy's team to see.
We can shoot for the earlier one, and we'll, if we have to continue, we will.
Well, Dick's right, you can do
I won't
that.
be here on the 3rd.
You won't be here on the 3rd, okay. Everybody else gonna be here on the 3rd?
As far as I know.
I mean, I guess bottom line, either it's ready or it's not.
Dennis can always
Right.
participate by video later, reviewing video and so forth. So it doesn't mean a no vote just because he's absent.
I would move to continue to schedule that for the December 3rd meeting.
Second?
Any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Interesting
Yes.
application, folks.
If you need to continue it, you're going to need to, you can make those plans ahead of time, and then we just meet and we vote to continue. You don't have to show up
Very
to
good.
say we need to continue.
Understood.
You can just let staff know, and they let us know that we need to continue it, and we'll just, you might give us an idea what you want to continue to, if you, another month or whatever, but, yeah, I mean, everybody doesn't have to show up. That can be determined ahead of time. I mean, it gets notified in
Yeah.
advance, but you can basically cancel your portion.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and Ben, or Lisa, anyone, feel free to give me a ring later in the week. Even though Mitch is away, I'm happy to, help you sort of get started.
Yeah.
From a builder standpoint, this is still 10 times better than Burlington, so.
We don't leave holes in the ground.
All right, we'll move to other business. Decision deliberation of Bucky's Pub.
Yes, how would you like the decision modified?
I thought it was great.
We approved one, yeah?
We approved the sandwich and
Yeah.
160.
The one facing 116, and you said no to the one that didn't comply, that faced
we told him to work on that
south.
one.
And he's, just so you know, he's been in to talk to us about that.
Yeah. I see they've had some temporary ones up.
Yeah, he's been trying temporary ones to see what you
Yeah.
can see from Shelburne Falls Road, which is, I think, was helpful, because he was trying to figure out placement and such.
Besides, you can't have wall-mounted signs on the roof. but-
Right. I think that was a good decision that you made, based on last meeting's discussion.
Did we have a write-up? I didn't see one.
Yes, it was in your draft decisions folder.
Oh, okay.
So I had 0 changes. So move to approve.
Second.
You all right?
Oh, wait. Let me look.
That's a loaded question.
It's not in the meeting, yeah, so you have to go up a layer,
Okay, I was looking in the
and then
data.
up another layer, and then
Speed
up
readers.
another layer. Oh, and you don't have it yet, so John had the same issue, it hadn't been, he hadn't mapped it yet. I can map it for you. It's a new folder. We had to.
here anyways.
So, yeah, for those of you that are using Dropbox and don't see it on your machine, I sent a message out a while back when we started doing these draft decision folders. It's in a completely separate location, because basically what we did was we took all of your meeting folders and made them available to the public. So we couldn't put your draft decision folder in with them, otherwise the public would be seeing it, and these, we don't really want draft decisions floating around since they're not real. until they're finalized. So in your Dropbox, you have to go up several layers to actually see it. And I helped John this evening map it to his iPad, so I'm happy to do that for others as well.
And the lights on the sign facing 116 are the gooseneck.
Yep.
Sorry.
They are downcast, yep.
Okay, looks good.
I had a second. Any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Abstain.
Here, I can help you with it.
Can, after you help John, I have messed up this thing so badly.
Well, I can do some tech support, sure.
Let the kids play with it or what?
You were close.
Is there anything else? We're all set. Move to adjourn.
We're adjourned.
My good reader is like not good anymore.
Let's confirm we're off.